My name is Jordan Banks. I am 34 years old, and I am the CEO of a crisis management firm in Atlanta, Georgia. For 10 years, I have made a fortune fixing the reputations of politicians and athletes when their lives implode. I am the woman you call when you need a scandal buried or a narrative changed. I thought I could spot a liar from a mile away because I manage them for a living. I thought I was the smartest person in the room, but I was wrong. The biggest liar I ever met wasn't a client. He was the man sleeping in my bed. And the biggest crisis wasn't on the news. It was happening right inside my own marriage. If you are watching this, and you have ever felt that gut instinct telling you something was wrong but you ignored it because you wanted to believe in love, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because I am about to show you exactly how to handle a man who thinks he can play you. Tell me in the comments what city you are watching from and let me know if you believe in karma. It was raining in Atlanta. Not a soft drizzle, but a hard, punishing downpour that felt like the sky was grieving right along with me. I was standing under a large black umbrella, staring at the mahogany casket that held my father. He was a legend in this city, a man who built a real estate empire from nothing, a man who taught me that your name is your currency. And now he was gone. There were hundreds of people there, business partners, rivals, politicians, all paying their respects. But the one person who should have been standing right next to me holding my hand was missing. My husband Dante. The empty folding chair beside me felt like a slap in the face. Everyone was looking at it. I could feel their pity and their whispers burning into my back. I checked my phone for the 10th time. A text message from Dante sat on the screen. "Baby, I am so sorry. The flight from Chicago is still delayed. The weather has grounded everything. I'm trying to get to you. I love you." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I took a deep breath and tried to focus on the pastor's voice, but then my phone buzzed in my hand. It wasn't a text. It was a FaceTime request from Dante. My heart leaped. I thought maybe he was calling to tell me he had found a rental car and was driving down. I stepped away from the crowd, moving behind a row of marble angels so I could answer. I wiped the rain from my screen and tapped the green button. I was ready to see his worried face at an airport gate. I was ready to tell him it was okay. But the image that filled my screen made my blood turn to ice. Dante wasn't at O'Hare Airport. He wasn't in a terminal. He was in a bathtub, a massive white jacuzzi tub filled with bubbles. And he wasn't alone. He was holding a flute of champagne and laughing, his head thrown back. He hadn't meant to call me. His fat thumb must have slipped on the screen while he was trying to take a selfie or check a notification. The camera angle was low, looking up at his chin and that distinctive tattoo on his chest. I froze. My thumb hovered over the end call button, but my training kicked in. Crisis management rule number 1, never react until you have all the facts. I didn't hang up. I muted my microphone and I watched. Then I heard a voice that made me want to vomit. A woman's voice, high-pitched and playful. "Come on, baby, put the phone down and pass me the bottle." A hand reached into the frame, a hand with a very specific diamond bracelet. A bracelet I recognized immediately because I was the one who bought it. It was a birthday gift for Sienna, my college roommate, my maid of honor, the woman I had cried to just yesterday about losing my dad. Sienna walked into the frame wearing nothing but a hotel robe that was slipping off her shoulder. She sat on the edge of the tub and clinked her glass against Dante's. "To freedom," she said. Dante laughed again, a sound that was cruel and ugly. "To freedom, baby." The old man is finally gone. I know Jordan is going to be a mess, but think about the trust fund. Think about the control. We are going to be so rich. We just have to play the grieving family role for a few months, and then we cash out. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone into the mud. The world tilted on its axis. My father wasn't even in the ground yet. His body was literally being lowered into the earth 10 yards away from me, and my husband was celebrating his death in a hotel room with my best friend. They weren't just cheating, they were celebrating my pain. They were counting my inheritance like they had won the lottery. I felt a scream rising in my throat, a primal roar of rage that wanted to tear the world apart. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I swiped down on my control center and I hit the screen record button. I recorded every second of it. I recorded them kissing. I recorded Dante mocking my father's business sense. I recorded Sienna making a joke about how I looked in black. I let the timer run for 3 full minutes until Dante finally noticed the phone was active and the call abruptly cut off. The screen went black. I stood there in the rain alone. The tears that were for my father dried up instantly, replaced by something else, something cold and hard. I put my sunglasses back on. I adjusted the lapel of my black coat. I looked at the grave and I whispered, "You picked the wrong woman to go to war with Dante." I went through the rest of the funeral on autopilot. People hugged me and told me to stay strong. I nodded and thanked them, playing the part of the grieving daughter perfectly. But inside, my mind was racing. I was already planning. I was already moving pieces on a chessboard they didn't even know existed. That night, I sat in the living room of the house my father had bought for us as a wedding gift. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. At 2 in the morning, the front door opened. Dante walked in. He looked like a wreck. His shirt was untucked, his tie was loose, and he had rubbed his eyes to make them look red and puffy. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. He dropped his bag by the door and rushed over to me, dropping to his knees by the sofa. "Jordan, baby, I am so sorry. I tried everything. There were no flights. I screamed at the gate agent. I can't believe I missed it. I can't believe I wasn't there for you." He buried his face in my lap, and his shoulders shook with fake sobs. I looked down at the top of his head. I could smell him. He didn't smell like stale airport air or sweat or stress. He smelled like lavender hotel soap and expensive champagne. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to kick him in the teeth. I slowly reached out and patted his hair. "It's okay," I said, my voice flat. "You are here now. That is what matters." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with relief. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought I was just the stupid, grieving wife who needed a shoulder to cry on. Then the doorbell rang. At 2 in the morning. Dante stood up and wiped his dry eyes. "Who is that?" I didn't answer. I watched as he opened the door to reveal Jessica, his sister-in-law, my husband's brother's wife. A white woman who had never liked me, who had always looked at my family's success with a mixture of jealousy and suspicion. She walked in carrying a casserole dish like it was a weapon. "Oh, you poor thing," Jessica said, walking right past me to hug Dante. "I saw the lights on and I just knew you guys were up. Dante, you must be exhausted. I told everyone how hard you were trying to get back. It is just a shame the airlines are so incompetent." She turned to me and her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Jordan, I hope you aren't giving him a hard time. He is devastated he missed the service. You know how much he respected your father." I stared at her. I knew for a fact Jessica was the one who covered for Dante whenever he went on his business trips. She knew. She probably knew about Sienna too. She looked around my living room, eyeing the expensive art on the walls. Besides, she said, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone she always used with me. "You people are always so dramatic about funerals. It is a celebration of life, right? No need to make Dante feel guilty when he is clearly suffering." The microaggression hit me like a physical blow. You people. She had been doing this for years, making little comments about my hair, about my tone, about how loud my family was at gatherings. Usually I would check her. Usually I would put her in her place with a few sharp words. But not tonight. Tonight I had a bigger goal. I needed them to think I was weak. I needed them to think I was broken. I needed them to get comfortable. I slumped my shoulders and let out a long sigh. "You are right, Jessica," I said. "I am just tired. I am not thinking straight." "I am sorry, Dante. I know you tried." Jessica smirked a little victor's smile. "See?" she said to Dante. "She is just emotional. She needs rest." Dante sat down next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. The weight of his arm felt like a snake coiling around my neck. "I am just worried about you, babe," he said. "And the estate. I know your dad left a complicated will. You shouldn't have to deal with all that paperwork right now. You are grieving. Why don't you let me handle the legal stuff? I can talk to the lawyers. I can manage the accounts until you feel better." There it was, the hook. He wasn't even waiting 24 hours. He wanted access. He wanted the keys to the kingdom. I looked at Jessica, who was nodding encouragingly. "It is a good idea, Jordan," she chimed in. "Men are just better at handling the financial stress. You should focus on healing." I looked at Dante. I looked at the man who had promised to love and cherish me. The man who was currently plotting to steal everything my father had built. I thought about the video on my phone. I thought about Sienna laughing in that tub. And I smiled. A weak, tremulous little smile. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't think I can handle it. It is too much. Would you really do that for me, Dante? Would you really talk to the lawyers and get everything sorted out?" Dante's eyes lit up. He tried to hide it, but I saw the greed flash across his face like lightning. "Of course, baby," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "That is what a husband is for. I got you." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back. "You got me all right," I thought. "You have no idea what you just stepped into, because the paperwork I was going to give him wasn't the keys to the vault. It was the trigger to a trap my father had set 20 years ago, a trap designed specifically for a moment like this. Go ahead, Dante, take the lead. I am right behind you, and I am holding a shovel." The sun rose the next morning over Atlanta, but it brought no warmth to my house. It only illuminated the cracks in my life that were rapidly turning into canyons. I woke up with a pounding headache, not from grief, but from the sheer exhaustion of maintaining a facade. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were naturally puffy from lack of sleep, but I splashed cold water on my face and practiced my expression. I needed to look broken. I needed to look like a woman who had lost her anchor and was drifting helplessly out to sea. I needed to look like exactly the kind of victim Dante and his family thought I was. I put on a simple black dress, no makeup, and let my hair hang loose and messy. I walked downstairs to find my kitchen already occupied. Dante was there, sitting at the island drinking coffee from my favorite mug. Jessica was there too, rummaging through my refrigerator like she owned the place. She pulled out a container of organic berries I had bought for smoothies and started popping them into her mouth. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," Jessica said with her mouth full. "We didn't want to wake you. You were out cold. I bet you needed that." Dante looked up and gave me that sad puppy dog look again. "Morning, baby. How are you feeling?" I let my shoulders slump. I hugged my arms around my waist, making myself look smaller. "I feel terrible," I whispered, letting my voice crack just enough. "I can't stop thinking about the paperwork, about the business. Daddy handled everything. I don't know the first thing about the trust accounts or the offshore holdings. I feel like I'm drowning Dante." This was the bait. I watched Dante's eyes flicker. He stood up and walked over to me, wrapping me in a hug that made my skin crawl. "Shh, it's okay," he soothed, rubbing my back. "That is why I am here. Remember what we talked about last night. I can help you. I can take this burden off your shoulders." I pulled back and looked at him. My eyes were wide and pleading. I had to sell this. I had to win an Oscar right here in my kitchen. "Really?" I asked. "You would do that. You would handle the lawyers and the bank transfers. I just want to grieve. I just want to go visit his grave again today and be alone. I don't want to look at a single contract." Jessica chimed in from the fridge, leaning against the counter. "Honestly, Jordan, it is the smart thing to do. Dante has a head for business. You are too emotional right now. You would probably sign the wrong thing or lose money. Let the man handle it. Go take a spa day or something." Her condescending tone was usually enough to make me snap, but today it was music to my ears. She was helping me dig their grave. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. I sniffled and wiped my nose. "Okay, you are right. Come with me to the study." We walked into my father's home office. The room still smelled like his cigars and old leather. I walked over to the large oak desk and opened the top drawer. I pulled out a heavy manila envelope. Inside were the documents I had prepared the night before with my personal attorney. Documents that looked like standard power of attorney forms. Documents that looked like they gave Dante full unrestricted access to the bank's family fortune. I also pulled out a heavy brass key. "This opens the floor safe," I said, my hand trembling as I handed it to Dante. "The combination is your birthday. Daddy changed it last year because he knew I would remember it." That was a lie. Daddy never used Dante's birthday for anything. I had changed the combination 3 hours ago. Dante took the key and the envelope. His hands were actually sweating. He looked like a starving man who had just been handed a feast. "Thank you, baby," he said, kissing my forehead. "You won't regret this. I'm going to take care of everything. Go. Go see your dad. Take as long as you need." I nodded and grabbed my purse. I walked out of that house without looking back. I got into my black Mercedes and drove down the long driveway, but I didn't go to the cemetery. I drove exactly 2 blocks over to a quiet side street shielded by heavy oak trees. I parked the car and pulled out my iPad Pro. I had spent the last 24 hours turning my home into a surveillance state. There were cameras in the smoke detectors, cameras in the bookshelves, cameras in the eyes of the decorative African masks on the wall. I connected to the secure server and the interior of my house flooded onto the screen in high definition. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and turned up the volume. The audio was crystal clear. Back in the study, Dante wasn't looking sad anymore. He was practically dancing. He threw the heavy envelope onto the desk and high-fived Jessica. "Did you see that he laughed? Did you see how easy that was? She practically begged me to take the money. I told you she was weak without the old man." Jessica laughed, collapsing into my father's leather chair and spinning around. "God, she is pathetic, crying about being overwhelmed. I mean, how hard is it to just be rich? At least now the money is in the hands of someone who knows how to spend it. I have been eyeing that new Range Rover Dante. You promised me a car if this worked out." Dante was already on his knees at the floor safe. "Chill out, Jess," he said, spinning the dial. "You will get your car, Sienna gets her penthouse, and I get to finally stop pretending to like this boring, stuck-up family." He paused. "Got it." The safe door clicked open. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched on the iPad screen. This was the moment of truth. Inside that safe wasn't cash, it wasn't gold bars, it was a stack of binders. Dante pulled them out, his eyes scanning the labels. The bank's family trust, the real estate portfolio, the liquid asset access codes. "Jackpot," he whispered. He grabbed his phone. I watched on my screen as he dialed a number. He put it on speaker so he could keep flipping through the binders. "Hey, baby," he said. Sienna's voice chirped through the speakers. "Did it work? Is she gone?" Dante grinned. "She is gone. And guess what? The stupid bitch signed everything. I have power of attorney. I have the keys. I am looking at $50 million worth of assets right now. We made it, baby. We are officially loaded." I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Hearing him call me a stupid bitch hurt. Hearing him promise my money to the woman he got pregnant hurt even more. But then a cold calm washed over me. Because Dante hadn't read the fine print. He was so blinded by greed he hadn't bothered to read the restructuring clause on page 45 of the document he was holding. My father was a paranoid man, a brilliant paranoid man. He knew that people would come for his money. He knew that men would try to use me to get to his empire. So years ago he created a poison pill in the family trust. It was a clause called the Bloodline Protection Act. It stated that if any person not of direct blood relation attempted to access the primary accounts using a power of attorney within 12 months of his death, that action would not unlock the assets. Instead, it would trigger an immediate debt transfer. My father had structured his empire so that the assets were shielded in untouchable offshore trusts. But the liabilities, the massive commercial loans, the construction debts, the tax burdens were held in a shell company. By signing that power of attorney and using it to access the safe, Dante hadn't just failed to get the money. He had legally assumed personal liability for the shell company's debt. He thought he was holding $50 million. In reality, he was holding a bill for $18 million in commercial loans that were due in 30 days. I watched him on the screen celebrating. He was popping a bottle of whiskey from my father's collection, pouring a glass for himself and Jessica. They were toasting to their genius. They were toasting to my stupidity. I tapped the screen, zooming in on Dante's smiling face. "Enjoy that drink, Dante," I whispered to the empty car, "because it is the last expensive thing you will ever taste. You didn't just steal the keys to the castle, you stole the keys to the dungeon, and you just locked yourself in." I disconnected the feed and started the car. I wasn't going to the cemetery to cry. I was going to the bank to finalize the transfer of the debt. I was going to make sure that by the time Dante realized what he had signed, it would be too late to back out. The grieving widow was gone. The shark was awake, and the water was about to get very bloody. 2 days later, my mother-in-law Barbara decided to throw what she called a comfort barbecue in my honor. She claimed it was to lift my spirits, to surround me with family and love after the tragedy of losing my father. But I knew better. Barbara didn't do anything out of love unless it was for her precious son Dante. This wasn't a party. It was an ambush. And the location wasn't chosen by accident either. It was at Barbara's house, a cramped, dated bungalow on the other side of town that smelled permanently of mothballs and fried grease. I pulled up in my Mercedes and sat in the air conditioning for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I could see them in the backyard already. Dante was manning the grill, holding a beer, laughing with his brother. He didn't look like a man grieving his father-in-law. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. I took a deep breath, fixed my oversized sunglasses to hide the contempt in my eyes, and stepped out into the humid Atlanta heat. As soon as I walked through the gate, the music stopped. It was like walking into a courtroom where the jury had already decided you were guilty. Barbara came rushing over, wiping her hands on a stained apron. She was a short, stout woman who wore too much perfume and believed that her son was God's gift to the earth. "Jordan, baby," she screeched, pulling me into a suffocating hug. "Oh, look at you. You look so thin. Is Dante feeding you? You know stress eats away at your muscles. You need to eat. I made my famous potato salad just for you." I forced a smile. "Thank you, Barbara," I said. "I am just not very hungry." Barbara pulled back and looked me up and down, her eyes calculating the cost of my dress, my shoes, my bag. "Well, you need to keep your strength up," she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Especially now that you have to make big decisions. Dante told me you gave him access to the accounts. I am so proud of you, Jordan, finally letting a man take charge. You know your father, rest his soul. He was a controlling man. It is good for Dante to finally have some breathing room to show what he can do." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. She was talking about my father, a self-made tycoon, as if he was a burden. And she was talking about Dante, a man who couldn't even keep a credit score above 500, as if he was a financial genius. I just nodded and walked toward a folding chair in the corner, hoping to disappear. But peace was not on the menu today. Jessica sat down next to me immediately. She was wearing a sundress that was a little too tight and holding a glass of cheap white wine with ice cubes in it. She crossed her legs and looked at me with that fake sympathy that always made my skin crawl. "So, Jordan," she started swirling her wine, "Dante was telling us about the house. Your dad's estate is massive, isn't it? I mean, it must be overwhelming for just one person, especially a woman." I turned my head slowly to look at her. "It is a lot to manage," I said, keeping my voice even. "But I have a good team." Jessica let out a sharp laugh. "A team," she scoffed. "Lawyers and accountants who just want to bleed you dry. You know Dante has some really innovative ideas for that property. He was saying at dinner last night that you should sell the big house. The market is hot right now. Why do you need 10 bedrooms, Jordan? It is just you and Dante. It is ostentatious, don't you think? Plus, with the cash from the sale, Dante could finally launch his tech incubator properly." I stared at her. Tech incubator. That was the new word of the week. Last month, it was a crypto farm. The month before that, it was a luxury car rental service. Dante didn't have a business plan. He had a gambling addiction wrapped in fancy buzzwords. "You know," Jessica continued, leaning in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, "honesty is the best policy, right? My dad always said that people who make money that fast usually have to cut corners. Your dad was successful, sure. But in that industry, for a black man in the South to get that rich that fast, there had to be some shady deals, right? Some skeletons in the closet. Dante is different. He wants to build wealth the clean way. Pure investment. You should give him the chance to wash that money clean, Jordan." The audacity took my breath away. She was sitting there drinking wine paid for by my husband's allowance, which came from my salary, implying that my father was a criminal because he was a successful black man. Meanwhile, her brother-in-law was a con artist and her husband was currently unemployed. I wanted to throw my drink in her face. I wanted to scream that my father worked 18-hour days for 40 years. But I didn't. I remembered the cameras in my house. I remembered the debt transfer that was currently processing at the bank. "You might be right, Jessica," I said, forcing my voice to sound small and defeated. "Maybe the house is too much. Maybe it is time for a change. I just want Dante to be happy." Jessica beamed, tapping my knee. "Exactly. That is what marriage is. Sacrifice. You sacrifice the house so he can build the future. That is love, honey." Just then, the gate opened again, and my stomach dropped. Sienna walked in, my best friend, my maid of honor, the woman who was currently sleeping with my husband. She was wearing a romper that showed off her legs and carrying a store-bought pie. She scanned the crowd, spotted Dante at the grill, and gave him a look that was so intimate it made me want to vomit. Then she saw me and switched masks instantly. Her face crumpled into a mask of tragedy, and she rushed over. "Jordan?" she cried, dropping to her knees beside my chair. "Oh my God, I got here as fast as I could. I am so sorry I missed the funeral. I was stuck in a deposition in Charlotte. I felt terrible. I have been texting you nonstop. Didn't you get my messages?" Liar. She was in a bathtub with my husband drinking champagne. I looked at her at the fake tears welling up in her eyes, and I realized that she was actually worse than Dante. Dante was just greedy. Sienna was treacherous. She held my hands, her palms sweaty, and squeezed them. "I am here now," she said. "I am not going anywhere. I am going to help you get through this." Dinner was served on paper plates, burnt chicken, soggy potato salad, and corn that was still half frozen in the middle. We sat at two long folding tables pushed together on the patio. Dante sat at the head of the table like he was the patriarch. I sat on his right, and Sienna boldly sat on his left. Barbara was at the other end, beaming at her son. Jessica and her husband filled in the middle. So Barbara boomed her mouth full of chicken. "Tell us more about this investment. Now that you have the capital, what is the first move?" Dante wiped grease from his chin and grinned. "It is huge, Ma," he said, puffing out his chest. "I am looking at a commercial complex downtown. We are going to turn it into a mixed-use space. Luxury condos on top, high-end retail on the bottom. I have already got the architects lined up. I just need to liquidate some of the old man's stagnant assets to get the down payment. Jordan and I talked about it. She is on board. Aren't you, babe?" He put his hand on my thigh and squeezed. It wasn't a comforting squeeze. It was a warning, a claim of ownership. "Yes," I said, looking down at my plate. "Whatever you think is best, Dante. I trust you." Sienna giggled. "It sounds amazing, Dante," she said, leaning forward so her cleavage was on display. "You have always had such a visionary mind. Jordan is so lucky to have a man who can take control like this. Most men would be intimidated by her inheritance. But you are stepping up." I dropped my napkin. "Oops," I said. "I am so clumsy today." I bent down to pick it up. The tablecloth didn't quite reach the ground, and there in the shadows under the table I saw it. Dante's hand was resting on Sienna's bare knee. Her legs were open, and his fingers were tracing circles on her inner thigh. They were playing footsie, rubbing their calves together, right there, right next to me, at his mother's table, in front of God and everyone. The disrespect was absolute. It wasn't just an affair, it was a humiliation ritual. They got off on doing it right under my nose. They got off on thinking I was too stupid to notice. I grabbed the napkin and sat back up. My heart was pounding a rhythm of pure war drums against my ribs. I looked at Dante's smug face. I looked at Sienna's flushed cheeks. I looked at Jessica rolling her eyes at her husband. And I looked at Barbara, waiting for her cut of the money. They were vultures. All of them, picking at the carcass of my life before I was even dead. I took a sip of water and cleared my throat. The sound was sharp enough to cut through the chatter. I stood up. The table went silent. Dante looked nervous for a split second, removing his hand from Sienna's leg. "Jordan, baby, you okay?" he asked. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that in about 3 weeks, their entire world was going to burn to the ground. But before that happened, I needed to make sure they were all in the same place at the same time. I needed them out of the country, so they couldn't interfere with the foreclosure proceedings or the IRS audit I had anonymously triggered this morning. I just wanted to say thank you. I began, my voice trembling with faux emotion. Thank you all for being here, for welcoming me, for loving me. Losing my dad has been the hardest thing I have ever gone through, but hearing Dante talk about the future, hearing Barbara's support, seeing my best friend Sienna here, it makes me realize that family is the most important thing. I paused for effect. I saw Jessica exchange a look with Barbara like, get on with it. I know I have been a little distant, I continued. I know I have been hard to reach, but I want to make it up to you. I want to show my appreciation. Dante has been working so hard on these business plans, and I think before he dives into the stress of building this new empire, he deserves a break. We all do. I looked around the table, locking eyes with each of them. So I have decided to use some of the discretionary funds from the estate to treat everyone. I want to take us all to Europe. 2 weeks. Italy, France, maybe a little time on the Amalfi Coast. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, private yacht charters. My treat. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Barbara screamed and clapped her hands. Jessica actually choked on her wine. Sienna's eyes went wide with greed. Europe, Barbara yelled. Oh my God, I have never been to Europe. Oh Jordan, you are an angel. I knew you were a good girl. Dante looked stunned. He was calculating the cost in his head, realizing that I was offering to spend $50,000 or $60,000 on them. He saw it as a sign that the money tap was truly open. He stood up and hugged me, lifting me off the ground. Babe, that is incredible, he said, spinning me around. Seriously, you are the best wife in the world. Italy. We are going to live like kings. I hugged him back, resting my chin on his shoulder so I could look at Sienna. She was smiling, but there was a flicker of jealousy in her eyes because Dante was holding me. Don't worry, Sienna, I said, pulling away and looking directly at her. You are coming too. I wouldn't go without my best friend. I need you there to help me shop. Sienna squealed and ran over to hug us, creating a twisted group hug. Dante on one side, his mistress on the other, and me, the mark in the middle. Thank you, Jordan, she gushed. We are going to have the best time. It will be the trip of a lifetime. Yes, I said, smoothing my dress. It certainly will be. I looked at their happy, greedy faces. They were already planning their outfits. They were already imagining the Instagram photos. They had no idea that I wasn't taking them on a vacation. I was sending them into exile. I was clearing the board. While they were eating pasta in Rome and drinking wine in Paris, believing they had successfully scammed the grieving widow, I would be back here in Atlanta selling the assets, putting the house on the market, and locking the legal trap that would destroy Dante forever. Let's drink to it, Dante shouted, raising his beer. To the Banks family, to the future, to the money. I raised my glass of water. To the future, I echoed. I watched Dante down his beer. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy the high life for 2 more weeks. Because when you land back on American soil, you won't have a home to come back to. You won't have a car to drive. And you definitely won't have a wife to pay your bills. The countdown has officially started. And you are all flying first class straight into hell. While Dante spent the next 3 days buying designer luggage and bragging to his friends about the upcoming European tour, I was doing what I do best. I was working. I wasn't at my office downtown. I was in a nondescript brick building in an industrial park on the outskirts of Atlanta. This was the office of Ray Holding. He was a private investigator who used to be a homicide detective. And sitting next to him was Dr. Elena Ross. She was a forensic accountant, a woman who could find a single missing penny in a billion-dollar budget. I called her the money hunter. When I hired them 48 hours ago, I told them to turn over every rock in Dante's life. I wanted to know where every dollar went. I wanted to know who he was talking to. I wanted to know what he was hiding. I sat at the metal conference table, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. The room was cold and smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. Ray and Elena looked at each other. They had that look. The look doctors give you before they tell you it is terminal. Elena slid a thick black binder across the table toward me. Her manicured nail tapped the cover. Jordan, she said, her voice serious and professional. You need to brace yourself. We knew Dante was spending money on a mistress. We tracked the hotel charges, the jewelry purchases, the dinners. That is standard cheating husband behavior, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. What we found underneath is catastrophic. I opened the binder. The first page was a summary sheet. The numbers were staggering. Red ink everywhere. Dante has been presenting himself as a venture capitalist for the last 3 years, Elena explained, pointing to a column of figures. He told you he was investing in crypto startups and tech incubators. He lied. He wasn't investing. He was gambling. He opened accounts on unregulated exchanges based in the Cayman Islands. He poured money into high-risk meme coins and leverage trading. I looked at the transaction logs. $5,000 here, $10,000 there, $50,000 in one night. All gone. Wiped out in market crashes or pulled by scammers and rug pulls. He lost it all, I whispered. All the money I gave him for his business, it is all gone. Elena shook her head. It is worse than that, Jordan. He didn't just lose the allowance you gave him. He lost money he didn't have. Look at tab 3. I flipped to the third tab. It was a copy of a mortgage deed. My eyes scanned the document, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a second mortgage on our home, the house my father bought for us, the house that was supposed to be paid off. The document showed a loan for $400,000 taken out 6 months ago. At the bottom of the page were 2 signatures. One was Dante's, the other was mine. But that signature, I stared at it. It looked like my name. It had the loops and the slant of my handwriting. But I had never seen this document in my life. I traced the ink with my finger. I didn't sign this, I said, my voice trembling with rage. That isn't me. I never authorized a second mortgage. We know Ray said speaking up for the first time. We had a handwriting expert analyze it this morning. It is a forgery. A good one, but still a forgery. Dante practiced your signature. He signed your name to put a lien on your own house. He stole the equity right out from under you to fund his gambling addiction. I felt sick, physically ill. My husband hadn't just cheated on me with my best friend. He had committed a felony against me. He had risked the roof over my head. And the worst part is he didn't even pay off his debts with that loan, Elena continued. She flipped to the final tab. This is where it gets dangerous, Jordan. The crypto losses were massive, but he also borrowed on the street. He got involved with a private lending group out of Miami. And by private lending group, I mean loan sharks. She pulled out a photo. It was a surveillance shot of Dante meeting with 2 men in a parking lot. The men looked rough, dangerous. He owes them $500,000, Ray said. Principal plus interest. And the interest is compounding weekly. These aren't the kind of guys who send you a collection letter. These are the kind of guys who break kneecaps. That is why he was so desperate for your father's inheritance. He isn't trying to build a business. He is trying to buy his life back. He is terrified. If he doesn't come up with $500,000 by the end of the month, they are going to come for him. And since you are his wife, they might come for you too. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. The puzzle pieces finally fit together, the sudden affection, the desperation to control the estate, the way he and his mother were pushing me to sell the big house. They needed cash fast. They were going to take my father's hard-earned money and hand it straight to criminals to clean up Dante's mess. So what do? I asked, opening my eyes. I turn him in right. I go to the police. I file for divorce today. I show them the forgery. Elena sighed. You could, but in Georgia, you are in a community property trap, even with the forgery proving it takes time. And regarding the street debt and the other loans he took out in his own name, because you are married without a separation agreement, legally, half of that debt could be considered yours. If you divorce him today, the judge could look at the marital assets and the marital debts and split everything down the middle. You could end up owing $250,000 to his creditors. You could lose the house anyway to pay off his mistakes. I slammed my hand on the table. That is insane. He stole from me. He forged my signature, and I have to pay for it. It is the law, Ray said. Unless what I asked. Unless you can prove that the debt belongs solely to him, Elena said. Or unless you can get him to legally acknowledge that the debt is his responsibility and his alone before you file for divorce. You need a firewall, Jordan. You need to sever your financial liability from his reckless behavior, but you need to do it without him realizing that is what you are doing. I stared at the wall, my mind racing. I needed him to take the debt. I needed him to own it. I needed a post-nuptial agreement. But Dante was greedy. He would never sign a document that took away his rights to my money. Unless Unless he thought he was signing something else. Unless he thought he was signing a document that gave him access to even more money. A plan began to form in my head, a plan so devious and risky it made my palms sweat. I looked at the mortgage document again. I looked at the fake signature. "He thinks I am stupid," I said quietly. "He thinks I am a grieving, weak little woman who doesn't understand business. He thinks I trust him implicitly." I looked up at Ray and Elena. "Draw up a new contract," I said. "Not a divorce settlement. I want a post-nuptial agreement, but I want it wrapped in a bow. I want it to look like the key to the kingdom. We are going to tell him that in order to access the $10 million trust fund my father left, he has to sign a waiver. We will tell him it is just a formality to satisfy the board of directors, a standard liability waiver. But in the fine print on page 45, we are going to include a clause that states that any and all debts incurred by either party during the marriage, including loans, liens, and private promissory notes, are the sole and exclusive responsibility of the party who incurred them." Elena smiled. A slow, predatory smile. "You are going to trick him into claiming his own debt. I am going to let his greed do the work for me," I corrected. "He sees $10 million. He won't read the fine print about the $500,000 he owes. He will sign anything to get his hands on that trust fund. And once he signs it," Ray added, "you are in the clear. The moment his ink hits that paper, the debt is 100% his. You can divorce him 5 minutes later and walk away clean." "Exactly," I said, standing up. "But we have to move fast. We have to do it before the trip to Europe. I am going to present it to him tonight. I am going to tell him it is the final step before the money hits our account." I picked up the binder. The weight of it felt heavy in my hands. It was the weight of his betrayal. But it was also the weapon I would use to destroy him. "Send me the digital files," I said, walking to the door. "And Ray, keep watching him. I want to know every time he sneezes. If those loan sharks get close, I want to know." I walked out into the bright sunlight of the parking lot. My heart was cold. Dante had bet against me. He had bet our house, our marriage, and my safety on a crypto coin and a lie. He thought he was a player, but he was about to find out that he wasn't even at the table. I was the dealer, and I had just stacked the deck. That evening I walked into the living room carrying a leather portfolio that felt heavier than a gold brick. The house was quiet, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dante was sitting on the sofa scrolling through his phone, probably checking the price of Bitcoin or texting Sienna about their imaginary future. Jessica was there too, of course. She was sitting in my favorite armchair, flipping through a magazine, drinking another glass of my wine. When I entered the room, they both looked up. They looked like predators sensing a wounded animal. I took a deep breath. This was it. The performance of a lifetime. I had to sell this lie so hard that Dante would sign away his life without even reading the fine print. I walked over to the coffee table and set the portfolio down with a heavy thud. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound nervous. "I spoke to the estate attorney today. There is something else, something I didn't know about." Dante sat up straight, his eyes instantly alert. "What is it, babe? Is something wrong? Is there a problem with the money?" I sat down on the edge of the sofa, wringing my hands together. "Not a problem exactly," I said, "but a condition. My father left a secret rider in the trust. It is called the marital stability clause. Apparently he was worried about us. He was worried that the stress of his death might pull us apart, so he created an incentive." Dante leaned forward. "What kind of incentive?" I opened the portfolio. Inside was the document my team had drafted. It looked official. It had the gold seal of the state. It had the thick, cream-colored paper. It looked like a $10 million check waiting to be cashed. "He set aside a separate liquidity fund," I whispered. $10 million. Cash. Tax-free. It is sitting in an escrow account right now. I heard Jessica gasp. She actually dropped her magazine. $10 million, she repeated, her voice shrill. "You are kidding, right?" I shook my head. "No, it is real. But there is a catch. To release the funds, we both have to sign this document. It is a recommitment to our marriage. Basically, by signing this, we are agreeing to stay married and cohabitate for the next 10 years. If we divorce before that time, the money goes back to the charity fund. If we sign it, the money hits our joint account within 48 hours. I watched Dante's face. It was a masterclass in internal conflict. I could see the greed battling with the guilt. $10 million was the answer to all his prayers. It would pay off the loan sharks. It would buy the penthouse. It would buy the cars. But 10 years. He had to pretend to love me for 10 more years. I could see him doing the math. I could see him thinking about Sienna. 10 years is a long time, Dante said slowly, rubbing his chin. I mean, obviously, I love you, Jordan. But a contract. It feels a little unromantic, doesn't it? Your dad was really trying to control us from the grave, huh? My heart started to race. If he refused to sign, the plan would fall apart. I had to reel him in. I had to use his own arrogance against him. I know, I said, looking down at my hands. It is insulting. I told the lawyer I didn't think you would want to sign it. I mean, we don't need the money, right? We have the house. We have my salary. Maybe we should just refuse. I don't want you to feel trapped, Dante. If you don't want to sign it, we can just walk away from the 10 million. It is not a big deal. Dante's eyes almost popped out of his head. Walk away from $10 million. He looked at me like I was insane. No, 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 he said quickly, reaching for the paper. I didn't say that. I am just saying it is intense. But for our future, for the business. I mean, think about what I could do with 10 million liquid cash, Jordan. I could build that empire we talked about. I could take care of you forever. He was lying through his teeth. He was thinking that once the money was in the joint account, he would drain it and disappear. He probably thought he could sign the contract, take the cash, and run to a non-extradition country with Sienna. He thought he was smarter than the contract. But then he hesitated again. He looked at the thick stack of papers. There was a lot of legal jargon, a lot of small print. Maybe I should have my lawyer look at this, he said, just to be safe. You know, standard due diligence. Panic spiked in my chest. If he took this to a real lawyer, they would spot the debt transfer clause in 2 seconds. They would see that this wasn't a payout, it was a setup. I needed to stop him. But I couldn't object too strongly, or he would get suspicious. Then Jessica chimed in. My unexpected ally, my useful idiot. Oh, for God's sake, Dante, she snapped, setting down her wine glass. You are going to pay a lawyer $500 an hour to read a standard trust document. Give it here. She reached over and snatched the papers from Dante's hand. Jessica had worked as a paralegal for 6 months about 10 years ago before she got fired for incompetence. But in her mind, that made her a legal expert. She adjusted her reading glasses and started skimming the pages. I held my breath. I watched her eyes scan the text. She was looking for the big words. She was looking for the numbers. She wasn't actually reading the clauses. She flipped past page 10, past page 20. She landed on page 45, the page that contained the poison pill. The clause was titled Explicit Assumption of Liabilities. To a layperson, it looked boring. It said that in exchange for the rights to the trust, the beneficiary agrees to assume full solitary responsibility for all outstanding personal debts, liens, and encumbrances, regardless of origination. Jessica frowned for a second. What is this liability stuff, she asked. I thought I was going to pass out. I had to think fast. Oh, the lawyer explained that, I said casually. It just means that the trust money can't be used to pay off any old gambling debts or anything illegal. It protects the estate from being sued. It is just standard language to keep the money clean. Since neither of us has any huge debts, it doesn't really matter, right? Jessica nodded sagely. Right. That makes sense. It protects the principal. She looked at Dante. See? It is standard. It just says you can't use the money for illegal stuff, which you aren't doing anyway, right? Dante laughed nervously. Right. Of course not. Just investment stuff. Jessica flipped to the signature page. Honestly, Dante, she said, handing the papers back to him, this is ironclad. It basically guarantees you access to the funds as long as you stay married. And let's be real, even if you guys have problems down the road, who walks away from $10 million? You can fake it for 10 years if you have to. I mean, people do it for free every day. She laughed at her own joke, a cruel, jagged sound. Sign it, she commanded. Don't be an idiot. If you walk away from this because you are scared of a little commitment, you are the dumbest man in Atlanta. Mom will kill you if she finds out you turned down this kind of cash." Dante looked at Jessica. He trusted her. He trusted her more than he trusted me. If Jessica said it was safe, then it was safe. He looked at the pen I had placed on the table. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. My father's pen. "Okay," he said. "You are right, let's do it. For us." He picked up the pen. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought he could hear it. This was the moment. The point of no return. He uncapped the pen. The ink was black. Permanent. He turned to the last page. He didn't read the text above the signature line, the text that explicitly stated, "I, Dante Banks, hereby accept full legal responsibility for all debts listed in Addendum A, including the promissory note to the Miami Investment Group." He signed his name with a flourish, a big sweeping signature, Dante Banks. I watched the ink dry. It glistened in the lamplight. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He handed the pen to me. "Your turn, baby," he said, grinning. "Let's get that money." I took the pen. I signed my name below his. My hand was steady, rock steady, because I wasn't signing away my freedom. I was signing his death warrant. "Done," I said, capping the pen. Dante let out a whoop of joy. He grabbed me and kissed me on the cheek. $10 million, he shouted. "We are rich, baby. We are rich." Jessica raised her empty glass. "Cheers to that. Finally, some good news." I smiled at them, a tight, thin smile. "I'm going to go scan this and send it to the lawyer immediately," I said, standing up. "The sooner he gets it, the sooner the transfer happens." I walked out of the room holding the portfolio. I felt light as air. I walked into the study and locked the door behind me. I didn't scan it to the lawyer. I scanned it to the bank. And I scanned a copy to Dr. Elena Ross, my forensic accountant. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Elena. "The Eagle has landed." He signed it. "Execute the transfer." I watched the 3 little dots appear on the screen. Then a message came back. "Received. Filing the debt transfer now. By tomorrow morning, the $400,000 mortgage and the $500,000 street loan will be legally transferred to his name only. And since he has no assets to cover them, the default notices will start going out. You are free, Jordan. He owns it all." I put the phone down and looked at the signed contract. Dante thought he had just secured a fortune. He thought he was going to Europe to celebrate his victory. He didn't know that he had just wrapped a noose around his own neck and handed me the rope. I heard laughter coming from the living room. They were celebrating. They were probably opening another bottle of wine. Let them laugh. Let them toast. Because when that phone rings in Europe, when the loan sharks find out that their debt has been moved, when the bank calls in the mortgage on a house he doesn't own anymore, the laughter is going to stop. And I will be the only one smiling. I walked back into the living room, my face a mask of excitement. "It is sent," I announced. "The lawyer said we should see the funds by Friday, just in time for the trip." Dante pumped his fist in the air. "Yes, perfect timing. Europe, here we come." I looked at Jessica. "Thank you for looking over the contract, Jessica," I said sweetly. "I really appreciate your legal expertise. I don't know what we would have done without you." Jessica preened, looking pleased with herself. "Oh, don't mention it, Jordan. You have to know how to read these things. You have to look out for the family interests." I almost laughed out loud. "You certainly did, Jessica," I thought. "You looked out for the family interests all right. My family, not yours. You just helped me bury your brother-in-law, and you were too arrogant to even see the shovel." I sat back down and poured myself a glass of water. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The morning of the trip to Europe was chaotic and loud, just the way my husband's family liked it. There were 5 suitcases in the hallway for a 2-week trip. Jessica was shouting about her passport. Barbara was complaining that the limo was 3 minutes late, and Dante was running around like a child on Christmas morning, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He looked handsome in his designer travel sweatsuit, the one he had bought yesterday with a credit card that was technically already maxed out but didn't know it yet. Sienna was there too, of course, pretending to be the helpful best friend loading bags and double-checking the itinerary. I stood at the top of the stairs, clutching my stomach. This was the final performance before the curtain dropped. I had spent the last hour in the bathroom splashing water on my face and making myself look pale and clammy. I walked down slowly, gripping the banister. Dante looked up and his smile faltered. "Babe, you look terrible." "What is wrong?" I groaned and held my midsection. "It is the sushi from last night," I said, my voice weak and shaky. "I have been throwing up since 4 in the morning. I think it is food poisoning. I can barely stand up, Dante." Barbara rolled her eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake, now, of all times. The driver is outside Jordan. You can sleep on the plane. It is first class. The seats lay flat. Just take a Pepto and let's go." I shook my head and leaned against the wall. "I can't, Barbara. I really can't. If I get on that plane, I am going to be sick on everyone. You guys go. Please. I don't want to ruin the trip. I will fly out in a day or two when I feel better. I just need to sleep." Dante looked at me. I saw the wheels turning in his head. If I stayed behind, he would have 14 hours on the plane alone with Sienna. He would have the first few days in Rome without his wife watching his every move. He tried to look concerned, but I saw the spark of excitement in his eyes. He walked over and put a hand on my forehead. "You are burning up," he lied. He turned to the group. "She is right, Ma. She looks bad. We can't drag her onto a transatlantic flight like this." He looked back at me, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Are you sure, babe? I hate leaving you here. I can stay if you want." I forced a smile. "No. Absolutely not. This trip is a celebration. Go. Enjoy the champagne. I will join you in Paris on Wednesday. I promise. Just go and have fun for me." Jessica grabbed her carry-on bag. "Well, if she is sick, she is sick. Come on, Dante, the driver is waiting. We are going to miss the lounge access." "Feel better, Jordan. Drink some ginger ale." Sienna gave me a quick hug. "I will take good care of him, Jordan. Don't you worry. Get some rest." I watched them pile into the stretch limousine. I stood in the doorway, waving weakly, until the taillights disappeared around the corner of the driveway. As soon as they were out of sight, I straightened my posture. I dropped the hand from my stomach. The sickness vanished instantly. I walked back inside, locked the front door, and exhaled a long, slow breath. The house was silent. It was a beautiful silence. The rats were gone. And now the exterminator could get to work. I didn't go back to bed. I went straight to my home office and brewed a pot of strong black coffee. I had 14 days, 2 weeks to dismantle Dante's life brick by brick. I opened my laptop and logged into the secure server for our joint business venture, DB Holdings. Dante loved to tell people he was the CEO of DB Holdings. He had the business cards. He had the plaque on the desk. But Dante never read the operating agreement I had drafted 3 years ago. The agreement stated that while Dante was the public face of the company, I was the managing partner with sole authority to liquidate assets in the event of a market downturn. Well, Dante, the market just crashed. I started clicking. Sell, sell, sell. I sold the commercial property we had bought in Midtown. I sold the fleet of luxury cars he claimed were for a rental business, but actually just drove himself. I liquidated the stock portfolio. I drained the operating accounts. By noon, I had converted $3 million of hard assets into liquid cash. Then came the transfer. I didn't move the money into my personal account, where a judge could freeze it during a divorce. I moved it into the irrevocable trust I had set up for my mother in the Cook Islands yesterday. The trust had a very specific name, the Phoenix Foundation. Once the money was in there, it was untouchable. It was gone. Legally, DB Holdings was now an empty shell with 0 assets and a whole lot of tax liability that Dante would have to explain to the IRS. I watched the progress bar on the screen. Transfer complete. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of coffee. 1 down, 2 to go. For the next week, I lived a double life. During the day, I was a ruthless corporate raider stripping my husband of every dime he thought he had. At night, I would FaceTime Dante. He would answer from a cafe in Rome or a gondola in Venice looking tanned and happy. Sienna would be in the background laughing. "I miss you so much, babe," he would say, holding up a glass of wine. "Italy is amazing. You have to get here soon. Are you feeling better?" "I am getting there." I would lie coughing softly. "The doctor said it is a severe virus. I need a few more days. Go have fun. Buy something nice." And he did. My credit card alerts were blowing up my phone. Gucci, Prada, Rolex. He was spending money like water, thinking he had $10 million waiting for him at home. Every time a notification popped up, I smiled. "Spend it, Dante. Max it out. Dig the hole deeper, because you are going to be paying that bill for the rest of your life." On day 10 of their trip, I had one final meeting. This was the one I had been preparing for, the one that terrified me, but was necessary. I drove my car to a warehouse district in South Atlanta. I wasn't wearing my designer suits. I wore jeans boots and a nondescript jacket. I pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit billiards club. This was the headquarters of Marcus Russo, the man Dante owed $500,000 to. I walked past the bouncer who tried to stop me. "I am here to see Russo," I said, my voice steady. "Tell him I have Dante Banks's flight schedule." The bouncer paused, talked into his earpiece, and then stepped aside. Russo was sitting in a back booth smoking a cigar. He was a terrifying man with cold, dead eyes. He looked at me with amusement. "Mrs. Banks," he said, his voice like gravel. "This is a surprise. Usually the wives come here to beg for more time, or to cry. You don't look like you are going to cry." I sat down across from him. I didn't flinch. "I am not here to cry, Mr. Russo, and I am certainly not here to beg. I am a businesswoman. I am here to facilitate a transaction." Russo raised an eyebrow. "Are you here to pay his debt? Because with interest he is sitting at $600,000 as of this morning." I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "I am not paying you a dime. That is Dante's debt, not mine. And as of a contract signed last week, he has legally assumed full responsibility for it." I slid a copy of the post-nuptial agreement across the table. Russo glanced at it but didn't pick it up. "Paperwork doesn't mean much to me, Mrs. Banks," he said. "I want my money, and if he doesn't have it, I am going to break his legs. And then I might come visit you at that nice big house of yours." I leaned forward. "That is why I am here. You see, Dante has the money. He has plenty of it. He just isn't planning on paying you." Russo's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "He thinks you are stupid," I said, lying smoothly. "He told me that he moved his assets into untraceable cryptocurrency wallets. He has millions sitting on a ledger that he thinks you can't touch. He is in Europe right now, spending your money on first-class hotels and diamond necklaces for his mistress. He is laughing at you, Mr. Russo. He thinks he can come back, file for bankruptcy, claim poverty, and you will just write it off. He thinks he is untouchable." I saw the anger flare in Russo's eyes. It was a dark, dangerous heat. "No one laughs at me," he whispered. "No one." I reached into my bag and pulled out a piece of paper. This is his return flight itinerary. He lands at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport this Sunday at 4 p.m. Terminal E, international arrivals. He will be tanned happy and thinking he got away with it. I slid the paper toward him. "He is hiding the keys to his crypto wallets on a USB drive," I added, improvising the final nail in the coffin. "He keeps it on him at all times, probably in his carry-on bag. If you want your money, you need to get to him before he leaves the airport, before he has a chance to hide it again." Russo picked up the paper. He looked at the flight number. He looked at the time. Then he looked at me with a newfound respect. "You are a cold woman, Mrs. Banks," he said, "selling out your own husband to the wolves." "He sold me out a long time ago," I replied, standing up. "I am just balancing the books. Do whatever you have to do, Mr. Russo. Just make sure he understands that the debt is due, immediately." I walked out of that club without looking back. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had just sicked a pack of hungry wolves on my husband. I had told them a lie about crypto millions that would make them relentless. When they found out he didn't actually have the money, they wouldn't just be angry. They would be furious. I drove home feeling a strange sense of peace. The house was empty. The closets were cleared of my valuable items. The bank accounts were secured. The trap was set. Sunday was approaching, the day of judgment. I went home and poured myself a glass of vintage red wine. I sat on the patio and looked at the sunset. I wondered what Dante was doing right now, probably eating a final meal in Paris, toasting to his good fortune. Enjoy the croissant, Dante, because on Sunday you are going to be eating pavement. The call came through at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. It wasn't Dante calling to tell me he was coming home. It wasn't an airline notification. It was the private investigator, Ray. His voice was clipped and urgent. They are on the ground, Jordan. They took an emergency flight out of Rome this morning. They just landed and they are bypassing the baggage claim. They are in an ambulance headed to Northside Hospital. I didn't ask why. I didn't have to. I knew. I had seen the credit card charges from Italy the day before. An urgent care clinic, a pharmacy charge for prenatal vitamins and progesterone. Sienna was pregnant. And judging by the rush home, something was going wrong. My husband had cut his European vacation short, not to see his grieving wife, but to save his unborn child with another woman. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of a soldier who finally sees the enemy in the open field. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up from my desk and walked to my closet. I bypassed the black morning clothes I had been wearing for weeks. I reached for a suit, a blood-red power suit that fit me like a second skin. I put on my highest heels. I applied a layer of lipstick that matched the suit. I wasn't going to the hospital to be a victim. I was going to be the executioner. I drove to the hospital in silence. The city blurred past me. When I walked into the lobby, the air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I walked straight to the reception desk. My heels clicked against the linoleum, echoing like gunshots in the quiet hall. I flashed my ID and used my voice, the one I reserved for boardrooms and press conferences. "I am looking for Dante Banks," I said. He came in through the emergency room with a woman. "Sienna, I am his wife." The receptionist looked at me with pity. She typed on her computer, her eyes darting between me and the screen. "Oh, Mrs. Banks." "Yes, they are in room 304, in the obstetrics observation unit. Do you want me to call security?" I smiled, a terrifying sharp smile. "No, thank you. I want to surprise them." I took the elevator up. My heart was beating slow and steady. This was it, the final confrontation. I walked down the hallway reading the room numbers, 302, 303, 304. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The scene inside was like a tableau of betrayal painted by a master artist. Sienna was lying in the hospital bed, looking pale and small, connected to an IV drip. Her hand was resting protectively on her stomach, and sitting right beside her, holding her other hand, was Dante. He looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and he was leaning forward, whispering something to her. Standing at the foot of the bed was Jessica, arms crossed, looking worried. They were a family, a twisted, broken, secret family. And I was the outsider in my own marriage. I didn't knock. I just walked in. The sound of my heels made them all jump. Dante spun around in his chair. When he saw me, the blood drained from his face so fast, I thought he might faint. He stood up, knocking his chair back against the wall. "Jordan," he stammered. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lie, looking for anything to save him. "What are you doing here?" Jessica hissed. She stepped forward, trying to block my view of the bed. "You can't just barge in here. Can't you see this is a medical emergency? Have some respect." I ignored her. I looked past her, straight at Dante. Then I looked at Sienna. She was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes, pulling the sheet up to her chin as if a thin layer of cotton could protect her from what was coming. I walked further into the room until I was standing right at the foot of the bed. I looked at the monitors. I looked at the ultrasound image that had been printed out and left on the side table, a tiny gray blur, a heartbeat. So I said, my voice low and smooth, "This is why you came home early. I was worried, Dante. I thought maybe you had been mugged, or maybe you missed me. But I see you had more pressing matters." Dante took a step toward me, his hands raised in surrender. "Jordan, listen to me. It is not what you think. She got sick. She is my friend. I was helping her. You know how the healthcare system is in Italy. We had to get her back." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that silenced the room. "Stop it, Dante. Just stop." I pointed a manicured finger at the ultrasound photo. "You are helping your friend with her pregnancy." "Is that it?" The friend who you were sharing a hotel room with. The friend who you were rubbing legs with at your mother's table. Dante dropped his hands. The mask fell. He realized he couldn't lie his way out of this one. His face hardened. He straightened his spine and looked at me with a sneer. The sneer I had seen so many times when he thought I wasn't looking. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth? Here is the truth. Yes, she is pregnant. And yes, it is mine. And you know what, Jordan? I am glad you know. Because I am done pretending. I am done living in your shadow. I am done begging you for scraps." Sienna started to cry softly. "Dante, babe, don't," she whimpered. He ignored her. He was on a roll now, fueled by adrenaline and arrogance. He took a step closer to me, getting in my face. "I am leaving you, Jordan. I am going to be a father. A real father. And I am going to take care of my family. And thanks to your father's money, I can finally do that in style." I raised an eyebrow. "My father's money," I repeated. "That is right," he spat. "We signed the contract, Jordan. I have the trust fund, $10 million. It hit the joint account on Friday. I checked the balance before we left Rome. It is all there. So go ahead, sue me for divorce. I will give you half. $5 million is plenty for me to start over with Sienna. We are going to buy a house. We are going to live the life I deserve. So get out of here. Get out of my face and go back to your lonely, big, empty house." Jessica nodded aggressively from the corner. "Yeah, Jordan. Just leave. He doesn't love you. He has moved on. At least have some dignity." I looked at them. The audacity was breathtaking. He truly thought he had won. He thought he was standing on a pile of gold. He didn't know he was standing on a trap door. I took a deep breath. I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out my phone. "I am so glad you brought up the money, Dante," I said. "And congratulations. Seriously, I mean it. Congratulations on becoming a father again. It is a blessing. Children are expensive, though, especially when you don't have a job." Dante rolled his eyes. "I told you, I have $10 million. I smiled. "Actually, you don't. You should really check that balance again." Dante frowned. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His fingers fumbled as he opened the banking app. I watched his face. I watched the moment his heart stopped. He tapped the screen. He swiped down to refresh. He stared. He blinked. He refreshed again. "Where is it?" he whispered. His voice was high and thin. "Where is the money?" "It says zero. It says the account is overdrawn." I checked my nails. "Oh, that. Well, you see, Dante, when you signed that contract last week, you didn't just sign for the assets. You signed for the liabilities. Remember the fine print? The clause about assuming full responsibility for all debts?" Dante looked up at me. His face was gray. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said innocently. "I just followed the instructions of the contract you signed. The $10 million was collateral. It was immediately seized to cover the debts you assumed, specifically the $18 million in commercial loans my father's shell company owed. You paid off my family's debt, Dante." "Thank you. That was very generous of you." Dante dropped his phone. It hit the floor with a crack. "No," he gasped. "No, that is impossible. You tricked me." I took a step closer. I wasn't done. "And about the house," I continued, "the one you forged my signature on to get a second mortgage. Since you assumed all personal debts in that contract, that mortgage is now entirely in your name. But since the house is in my name, and you just admitted to fraud in front of a witness." I looked at Jessica, who was standing with her mouth open. "I have already contacted the bank. They are foreclosing on your loan, not my house. You owe them $400,000 immediately." Sienna started wailing, loud, ugly sobs. "Dante, what is she talking about? You said we were rich." I turned to Sienna. "Oh, honey, he is not rich. He is destitute. He is currently negative $8 million in the hole." Dante lunged at me. "You bitch," he screamed. "You set me up." I didn't flinch. I stood my ground. And then I delivered the final blow. The one that would haunt him forever. I took a step back toward the door. "Oh, and Dante, one last thing. I know about the loan sharks. I know about the $500,000 you owe the Miami group. And since I am a good citizen, I decided to help you out with your tax situation." Dante froze. His eyes were wide with terror. "I sent a gift to the IRS," I said, smiling sweetly. "I sent them copies of your offshore accounts, the ones where you lost all the money trading crypto, and I sent them the contract where you claimed full responsibility for your financial dealings. They are very interested in how you funded those accounts, Dante. In fact, I think I saw a couple of agents in the lobby downstairs. They seem to be asking for room 304. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the beeping of the heart monitor connected to Sienna. Dante looked at the door. He looked at the window. He looked like a rat trapped in a cage. "You ruined me," he whispered. "You ruined yourself, Dante," I replied. "I just signed the paperwork." I turned to leave. My hand was on the doorknob when I stopped and looked back one last time. "Good luck with the baby," I said. "I hope he takes after his mother, because his father is going to be away for a very long time." I walked out into the hallway. I didn't look back. I heard Jessica screaming. I heard Dante throwing things. I heard the chaos erupting behind me. But I kept walking. My heels clicked a rhythm of victory. I walked past the nurse's station. I walked past the elevator. And just as I reached the lobby, I saw them. Two men in dark suits with earpieces walking purposefully toward the elevators. FBI or IRS. It didn't matter. They were the cleanup crew. I walked out of the hospital doors and into the warm Atlanta afternoon. The sun was shining. The air tasted sweet. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with freedom. I was single. I was rich. And I was free. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. "It is done," I said. "File the divorce papers. And tell the real estate agent to list the big house. I am ready for a smaller place. Something with a view." I got into my car and drove away, leaving the wreckage of my marriage burning in the rearview mirror. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel lonely. I felt powerful. I had walked through the fire and I hadn't just survived. I had burned the devil himself. You would think that after the humiliation at the hospital, Dante would have gone into hiding. You would think that a man who had been exposed as a cheater, a liar and a thief in front of his pregnant mistress, would have the decency to crawl into a hole and disappear. But you don't know Dante, and you certainly don't know the level of delusion that ran through his family's veins. They showed up at the law offices of Sterling and Vance at 9 a.m. sharp. All of them. Dante was wearing a suit that I knew for a fact he had bought with a maxed-out credit card 3 days ago. Barbara was wearing her Sunday best hat, looking like she was ready to collect a lottery check. Even Jessica was there clutching a notepad like she was ready to take minutes for a board meeting. And Sienna. Yes. He brought his pregnant mistress to the reading of my father's will. The audacity was so thick you could choke on it. I sat at the other end of the long mahogany table. I was alone. I didn't need an entourage. I was wearing black, not out of mourning, but because I was the executioner, and black is the appropriate color for a funeral. And that is exactly what this was. It was the funeral of Dante's life. Mr. Sterling, my father's attorney for 40 years, walked in. He was an old-school Southern lawyer with silver hair and a voice that sounded like gravel crunching under tires. He didn't look at Dante. He didn't look at the circus on the other side of the table. He sat down, opened a leather binder, and adjusted his reading glasses. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Sterling said. "We are here to execute the final will and testament of Mr. Marcus Banks, as well as to address the addendums regarding the marital assets of his daughter, Jordan Banks." Dante leaned forward. He was sweating. I could see the beads of perspiration on his forehead. He was desperate. He was clinging to a shred of hope that maybe the hospital confrontation was a bluff. Maybe the money was still there. Maybe he could still salvage something. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Dante said, his voice shaking. "Just get to the numbers. We know about the trust fund. We know about the $10 million. I signed the contract. Jordan said there was a condition, but I signed it. So just tell me when the transfer happens." Mr. Sterling looked over his glasses at Dante. He looked at him like he was a bug on a windshield. "Mr. Banks, please let me finish," he said. He began to read. He read through the charitable donations first. My father left money to the local Boys and Girls Club. He left money to the Historical Society. He left money to the University Scholarship Fund. Every time he read a donation, Barbara let out a little groan of pain. She was mentally calculating how much of her son's money was being given away to strangers. And finally, Mr. Sterling said, turning the page, "We come to the primary estate, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, and the liquid cash reserves." Dante sat up straighter. Sienna grabbed his hand. Jessica clicked her pen, ready to write down the millions. "My father," Mr. Sterling read, left explicit instructions regarding the distribution of these assets. He was a man who believed in stewardship. He believed that wealth should only go to those who have the wisdom to protect it. Therefore, the entirety of the bank's real estate portfolio and all liquid cash assets are hereby transferred into the Jordan Banks Revocable Trust to be managed solely by his daughter, Jordan Banks. The room went silent. Dante blinked. "Wait," he said. "Wait a minute. That is not what the contract said. Jordan and I signed a post-nuptial agreement last week. It said I get access. It said if I signed the marriage commitment, I got access to the $10 million liquidity fund." Mr. Sterling pulled out another document. It was the one we had tricked Dante into signing, the one with the wet ink still fresh on the page. "Ah, yes," Mr. Sterling said. "The agreement dated October 12th. I have that right here. And you are correct, Mr. Banks. This document does outline a specific distribution of assets for you." Dante let out a breath he had been holding. "See," he said, turning to me with a smug grin. "I told you. You can't trick me, Jordan. A contract is a contract." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. According to this agreement, Mr. Sterling read, in exchange for assuming full and sole liability for all debts incurred during the marriage, including but not limited to the Miami promissory note and the secondary mortgage lien, Mr. Dante Banks is granted 100% ownership and control of the Banks family subsidiary known as Green Earth Solutions. Dante froze. "Green Earth Solutions," he repeated. "What is that? Is that the solar company? Is that the tech firm?" Jessica leaned over, whispering loudly, "It sounds eco-friendly, Dante. Green energy is huge right now. That could be worth millions." Mr. Sterling continued, his face completely impassive. Green Earth Solutions is a waste management holding company established in 1998. Its primary assets include a defunct landfill in rural Alabama, 3 garbage trucks currently inoperable due to mechanical failure, and a warehouse used for chemical storage. Dante's mouth fell open. "A landfill? You gave me a landfill, Mr. Sterling held up a hand. "Please, let me finish, Mr. Banks. As the new owner of Green Earth Solutions, you also acquire its current standing with the federal government. The company is currently the subject of an active investigation by the Environmental Protection Agency for illegal dumping. It carries a fine of $2.5 million. Furthermore, the company has an outstanding tax lien from the IRS in the amount of $1.8 million for unpaid payroll taxes." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy. It was crushing. "So to summarize," Mr. Sterling said, closing the folder, "by signing this agreement, you have voluntarily absolved Mrs. Banks of any financial responsibility for your personal debts. And in exchange, you have accepted ownership of a company that has 0 revenue and over $4 million in federal debt and legal liabilities. Congratulations, Mr. Banks. You are now a business owner." Dante made a sound like a wounded animal. He stood up so fast his chair flew backward and hit the wall. "No," he screamed. "No. That is a lie. That is not what I signed. I didn't sign up for debt. I signed up for the trust fund." Jessica jumped up, her face red with panic. "There has to be a mistake. I read that contract. I read it myself. It said he gets the liquidity fund. It said $10 million. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It started as a chuckle and turned into a full, rich laugh that echoed off the mahogany walls. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my black dress. I walked over to the other side of the table until I was standing right in front of Jessica. "Oh, Jessica," I said, shaking my head, "you really should stick to what you know." I looked her up and down. "You are a yoga teacher, Jessica," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "You spend your days telling suburban moms to breathe into their chakras. You wear leggings to work. What on earth made you think you were qualified to read a complex corporate restructuring agreement?" Jessica stammered. I used to be a paralegal. You answered phones at a law firm for 6 months 10 years ago," I corrected her. That doesn't make you a lawyer. It makes you a receptionist with an inflated ego. I picked up the contract from the table and flipped to page 45. Did you read the definitions in the appendix, I asked? Did you read the schedule of assets listed in Exhibit B? No, you didn't. You saw the words 10 million, and you stopped reading. You were so blinded by greed, so desperate to get your hands on my father's money, that you walked your brother-in-law right into a trap. I shoved the paper toward her. Read it now, Jessica. Read the fine print. It says right there. The liquidity fund is defined as the assets of Green Earth Solutions, and the liquidity refers to the chemical runoff in the landfill, not cash. You advised him to sign this. You told him it was ironclad. Well, you were right about one thing. It is ironclad, and now he is locked inside it. Dante grabbed the paper from Jessica's hands. He tore through the pages, his eyes wild. He was looking for a loophole. He was looking for an escape. "This is fraud," he yelled. "You tricked me. I will sue you. I will tell the judge you misled me." Mr. Sterling spoke up from his chair. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mr. Banks. You had the opportunity to consult your own legal counsel. In fact, Mrs. Banks explicitly suggested you show this to a lawyer. Your sister-in-law is on record stating that she reviewed it and advised you to sign. The court will not look kindly on a man who signs a business contract and then claims he didn't understand it because he was too cheap to hire an attorney. You are an adult, Mr. Banks. You signed your name. You own this." Barbara started wailing. "My son, my poor son. You ruined him. You are a witch. You are evil." I looked at Barbara. "No, Barbara, I am not evil. I am just efficient. You spent years looking down on me. You spent years making little comments about my family, about how we were too aggressive, too loud, too ambitious. You loved spending our money, but you hated respecting where it came from. Well, now you know. This is where it comes from. It comes from being smarter than the people trying to rob you." I turned back to Dante. "You wanted to be a big shot, Dante. You wanted to be a tycoon. Well, now you are. You are the CEO of Green Earth Solutions. You have a landfill to manage. You have the EPA breathing down your neck. You have the IRS auditing your books. And you have the Miami loan sharks looking for their money. I suggest you get to work. You have a very busy schedule." I picked up my purse. The meeting was over. The payload had been delivered. Sienna was sobbing quietly in the chair, holding her stomach. She looked at Dante with horror. She realized that the golden goose was actually a ticking time bomb. "I am leaving," she whispered. "I can't be part of this. The FBI, the debt. I can't do this, Dante." Dante reached for her. "Sienna, wait. We can fix this." "No, you can't," she screamed, pulling away from him. "You are broke, Dante. You are worse than broke. You are going to jail." She ran out of the room, leaving the door swinging behind her. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at the ruins of the Banks family. Dante was slumped in his chair, defeated. Jessica was staring at the wall in shock. Barbara was crying into her handkerchief. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "thank you for your time. Please send the final divorce decree to my office once Mr. Banks has been served. I will take care of it." "Mrs. Banks," Mr. Sterling said with a small, rare smile. I walked out of the office. The hallway was long and bright. I felt light. I felt clean. The weight of the last few weeks was gone. I had my father's legacy. I had my freedom. And I had the satisfaction of knowing that the people who tried to break me were now broken themselves. I took the elevator down to the lobby. As I walked out of the building, I saw a tow truck backing up to Dante's Range Rover, which was parked in the fire lane. I watched as the driver hooked it up. Dante hadn't made a payment in 3 months. I stood there for a moment watching his car being lifted into the air. It was a beautiful sight. "Goodbye, Dante," I whispered. "I hope you enjoy the walk home." The ink on the contract wasn't even dry before the heavy oak doors of the conference room flew open with a force that shook the walls. It wasn't a polite knock, it was an invasion. 6 agents wearing navy blue windbreakers with those 3 terrified yellow letters, FBI, stamped on the back, stormed into the room. They moved with the precision of a military strike team, fanning out to block every exit. The air in the room instantly shifted from corporate tension to criminal panic. Dante scrambled backward his chair, screeching against the floor, but there was nowhere to go. Federal agents, one of them shouted, his voice booming off the expensive mahogany paneling. "We have a warrant for the arrest of the owner of Green Earth Solutions." Dante froze. He looked at the agent, then he looked at the contract, still clutching it in his trembling hand. He looked like a man holding a live grenade that he had just pulled the pin on. "That is him," I said, calmly pointing a manicured finger at my husband. "Dante Banks. He is the sole owner and CEO. He just signed the transfer of ownership 5 minutes ago. The document is right there in his hand." The lead agent marched over to Dante. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for an explanation. He grabbed Dante's wrist and twisted it behind his back. The sound of metal handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Dante started screaming. No, wait. I am not the owner. I mean, I am, but I just got it. I didn't do anything. It was her. She tricked me. She gave me this company." The agent ignored him. "Mr. Banks, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit environmental fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering through the Green Earth Solutions entity. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jessica jumped up from her chair, knocking over a pitcher of water. She was hyperventilating, backing away from Dante like he was contagious. I didn't know she shrieked. "I didn't know anything about fraud. I just read the contract. I am not involved. Don't arrest me." I watched her with a cold smile. The loyal sister-in-law who was so eager to help steal my money was now throwing her own family under the bus to save her skin. It was pathetic. One of the agents turned to Jessica. "Ma'am, sit down and keep your hands where we can see them. We will be seizing all documents in this room as evidence." Barbara was clutching her chest, gasping for air. "My baby," she wailed. "They are taking my baby. Jordan, do something. Tell them he is a good boy. Tell them it is a mistake." I looked at Barbara. I looked at the woman who had raised this narcissist, who had enabled his greed, who had taught him that women were just stepping stones to be used and discarded. "It is not a mistake, Barbara," I said, my voice cutting through her wails. "It is justice." As the agents hauled Dante toward the door, he fought against them, kicking and screaming. He looked wild. He looked desperate. And then his eyes locked on the glass wall of the conference room that looked out into the hallway. I had left the door to the waiting area slightly ajar, and standing there just outside the perimeter of the FBI agents were 2 men. They weren't wearing windbreakers. They were wearing cheap leather jackets, and they looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. It was Russo's men. The loan sharks. I had texted Russo the address of the law firm before the meeting started. I told him that Dante would be coming into a large sum of assets and that he should probably be there to collect. Dante saw them. He saw the cold, dead look in their eyes. He realized instantly that going to federal prison might actually be the safer option. If the FBI didn't get him, Russo would. He was trapped between the law and the street, and both of them wanted his blood. "Help me," Dante screamed, looking at me. "Jordan, please, don't let them take me. I will sign it back. I will give you everything back. Just help me." I stood up slowly. I walked over to the head of the table where the presentation remote was sitting. I picked it up. "You can't give me anything back, Dante," I said. "You have nothing. But I do have one last thing to give you, a goodbye present." I pressed a button on the remote. The large projection screen at the back of the room lowered from the ceiling with a soft hum. I connected my phone to the system. "You kept asking why I was so cold, Dante. You kept asking why I didn't cry when you missed the funeral. You gave everyone this sob story about a delayed flight, about how heartbroken you were that you couldn't be there to hold my hand while I buried my father." I looked at the FBI agents who had paused their exit to watch. I looked at the lawyers. I looked at his family. "I think everyone here deserves to know the truth," I said. "I think the federal government should see exactly what kind of character they are dealing with. This is where my husband was while I was standing at my father's grave in the rain." I hit play. The video filled the room. High definition, amplified sound. There was Dante, naked in the bathtub, holding the champagne glass. There was the sound of his laughter, that cruel, mocking laughter. There was Sienna walking into the frame wearing the robe. And then his voice boomed through the conference room speakers clear as a bell. "The old man is finally gone. I know Jordan is going to be a mess, but think about the trust fund. We are going to be so rich. We just have to play the grieving family role for a few months." The room went deathly silent. Even the FBI agents looked disgusted. One of them tightened his grip on Dante's arm. Barbara stopped crying. She stared at the screen, her mouth open. She saw her son celebrating the death of the man who had paid for her house, who had paid for her car, who had paid for this very suit she was wearing. Jessica looked down at the table, unable to watch. Dante stopped fighting. He slumped in the agent's grip. The air went out of him. He knew there was no coming back from this. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a monster, and now everyone knew it. I walked over to him. I stood inches from his face. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. "You didn't miss the funeral because of a plane, Dante," I whispered. "You missed it because you were too busy celebrating your victory. You thought you had won the lottery. You thought you were free." I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a deadly hiss. "Well, here is the irony. You missed my father's funeral. But don't worry, you won't be late for yours. Because this right here, this moment, is the end of your life. Dante Banks is dead. All that is left is a number in a federal prison system." I nodded to the agents. "Take him away, boys. He is all yours." The agents shoved him forward. They dragged him out of the room, past the stunned secretary, past the silent lawyers, past the loan sharks who were watching with grim satisfaction. Dante didn't scream anymore. He didn't beg. He just hung his head and let them drag him out. He was a broken man, a shell. I turned back to the room. The video was still playing on loop, Dante laughing, Sienna drinking. I pressed the button and the screen went black. I picked up my purse. I looked at Barbara and Jessica, who were sitting in the ruins of their arrogance. "I expect you both to vacate my property by the end of the day," I said calmly. "I am changing the locks at 5 p.m. Anything left inside will be donated to charity. And Barbara, if you want to visit your son, I suggest you start saving for the bus fare. It is a long ride to the federal penitentiary." I turned and walked out. I walked past the empty reception desk. I walked out the front doors. I saw the flashing lights of the police cars reflecting off the glass buildings. I saw Dante being shoved into the back of a squad car. He looked up through the window. Our eyes met one last time. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just put on my sunglasses and turned away. My father used to say that the best revenge is living well, but he was wrong. The best revenge is watching the people who tried to destroy you destroy themselves. I walked to my car, my head held high. The storm was over. The sky was blue. And I had a whole new life to live. A life without lies, a life without thieves, a life that was finally completely and unapologetically mine. It has been 6 months since the day the FBI dragged my husband out of that conference room in handcuffs, and I can honestly say that justice tastes sweeter than any vintage champagne I have ever drunk. The trial was the social event of the season in Atlanta. Every news outlet was there. They called it the Black Widow versus the Crypto King scam, but we all knew who the real victim was. I sat in the front row every single day, wearing my best suits, looking unbothered and untouched, while Dante crumbled on the stand. His defense was laughable. He tried to tell the jury that I had manipulated him. He tried to say that I was a vindictive wife who tricked him into signing a fraudulent contract, but the prosecutor destroyed him. He held up that post-nuptial agreement, the one Jessica had urged him to sign, and he asked Dante a simple question. "Mr. Banks, did you or did you not sign this document of your own free will in exchange for what you believed to be $10 million? Dante had to answer yes. He had to admit to his own greed in open court. The judge was a no-nonsense woman who saw right through Dante's charm. She didn't see a victim. She saw a predator who had finally been caught. She sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. 10 years. When the gavel banged down, Dante looked back at me. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked empty. He knew that by the time he got out, he would be 46 years old with nothing to his name but a criminal record and a bad back. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out of the courthouse to address the waiting press. But Dante wasn't the only one who fell. The dominoes kept falling one by one, just like I knew they would. Jessica was next. The woman who thought she was smarter than me, the woman who called my family dramatic, found herself in a drama of her own making. It turns out that when your husband finds out you advised his brother to sign a contract that brought federal agents to the family doorstep and humiliated the bank's name on national television, he tends to get upset. Dante's brother filed for divorce 2 weeks after the arrest. He cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the real reason. Jessica was a liability. She was dangerous. She tried to fight it, of course. She tried to come to me for help. Can you believe the audacity? She showed up at my office crying, begging me to talk to her husband, to tell him it was an honest mistake. I had security escort her out. As she was being dragged away, kicking and screaming in her yoga pants, I couldn't help but think about how she had sat at my table eating my food and plotting my demise. Now she is living in a one-bedroom apartment working at a juice bar because no law firm in the city will hire a former paralegal who was implicated in a federal fraud case. And then there is Sienna, my former best friend, the mother of my husband's child. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. She gave birth to a baby boy last month. He is innocent in all this, and I truly hope he grows up to be a better man than his father. But Sienna is living a nightmare. You see, during the investigation, my forensic team found something interesting. When Dante was desperate for cash, when he was spiraling and taking out loans from everyone in town, he didn't just use his own name. He used hers. He had taken out 3 credit cards and a personal line of credit in Sienna's name, forging her signature just like he had forged mine. He racked up over $80,000 in debt under her identity to fund his gambling. I saw the documents weeks ago. I could have told her. I could have warned her. I could have intervened, but I didn't. I let it happen. I figured it was a fitting punishment. She wanted to share a life with him so badly. Well, now she gets to share his debt. Sienna is now a single mother raising a child alone, drowning in bills she can't pay, dodging calls from collectors, and realizing that the man she betrayed me for didn't love her either. He just used her like a credit card. She sent me a letter last week, a 4-page handwritten apology, begging for forgiveness, begging for a loan to help with the baby. I didn't finish reading it. I ran it through the shredder and sprinkled the confetti into my cat's litter box. Closure is a myth. I don't need her apology. I have my peace. Today, the sun is shining in Atlanta. It is one of those perfect, crisp autumn days where the sky is a brilliant blue and the air feels clean. I drove to the cemetery this morning, but this time I wasn't standing in the rain under a black umbrella, feeling like my world was ending. I was driving my new car, a custom Aston Martin convertible with the top down. I pulled up to the gates and walked the familiar path to my father's grave. The grass has grown in nicely. The headstone is polished marble, standing tall and proud just like he did. I knelt down and placed a single white rose on the stone. Next to it, I placed a copy of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The headline on the front page read, "Local businessman Dante Banks begins sentence at federal penitentiary." I traced my father's name on the stone. "I told you I would handle it, Daddy," I whispered. "I told you I wouldn't let them take what you built. The house is sold. The debts are settled. The company is leaner and stronger than ever. The stock price is up 20% since I took over full control. I did it. I protected the legacy. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the wind in the trees. I felt a lightness in my chest that had been missing for years. For so long, I had been carrying the weight of Dante's lies, the weight of trying to be the perfect wife, the weight of keeping up appearances. Now that weight was gone. I was just Jordan, and Jordan was enough. I walked back to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out and saw the name on the screen. It was Michael, the CEO of a rival firm in New York. We had been talking about a merger, about joining forces to create the largest crisis management agency on the East Coast. He was smart, he was successful, and he treated me with the respect I deserved. I answered the call. "Hello, Michael," I said, leaning against the door of my car. "Jordan," he said, his voice warm. "I saw the news about the trial. I just wanted to call and say congratulations. It takes a hell of a lot of strength to do what you did." "Thank you, Michael," I replied. "It was necessary. Sometimes you have to burn the dead wood to let the forest grow." He laughed. Remind me never to cross you, Jordan. You are dangerous. I smiled up at the sun. I am not dangerous, Michael. I am just focused. So about this merger, I have some ideas, but I want to do it on my terms. 51% controlling interest, and the headquarters stays in Atlanta. There was a pause on the line. Then Michael chuckled. You drive a hard bargain, but I think we can make that work. Dinner next week to discuss the details. I will check my calendar, I said. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I saw the fine lines around my eyes from the stress of the last year, but I also saw a fire that hadn't been there before. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a conqueror. I started the engine, and the car roared to life, a powerful beast ready to eat up the road. As I pulled out of the cemetery gates, leaving the dead behind, I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the betrayal, the pain, the fear, and then I thought about the victory. People always say that revenge is a dish best served cold. They say you should wait, you should be patient, you should let karma do the work. But I have never been a patient woman, and I have never liked cold food. I prefer my revenge hot. I like to serve it right on the banquet table while the steam is still rising. I like to serve it when my enemies are starving, when they are drooling with greed, thinking they are about to feast on my misfortune. That is when you flip the table. That is when you watch them choke on their own ambition. I turned onto the highway and pressed down on the accelerator. The wind whipped through my hair. I was driving toward a future that was entirely of my own making. No husband to weigh me down. No fake friends to stab me in the back. Just me, my empire, and the open road. My name is Jordan Banks. They tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed. And now look at the harvest. I won. Goodbye, Dante. Goodbye to the past. And hello to the glorious, beautiful, ruthless future.